Battlefield 2042 has recently had the 3.2 update in Season 3, bringing back the classic Battlefield class system. Specialists have been integrated into this class system, and today we'll be going through my tier list of the best to worst specialists to choose in the Assault class. My name's Dame, and this is DameOver, and I will be showing you this tier list at the end of the video, so feel free to skip ahead, but if you want to know the reasons why each of the specialists has got the rating that they've got, then stick around for the full video. If you do enjoy this video, it'd be great if you could hit the like button. I also stream 6 days a week, so it'd be great to see you on those live streams, so if you are new here, hit that sub button as well, and hopefully I'll see you on the lives. Right. In no particular order, we're going to start with Zane. And before I forget to say it, the class system has also brought in weapon proficiencies and a class gadget. The weapon proficiency for the Assault class is 3 extra magazines if you're choosing to use an Assault rifle, and the class gadget is a med pen where you can restore your health with a self-administered emergency medical booster, which happens very, very quickly. So back to Zane, and his specialist gadget, in case you don't know by now, is the XM370A airburst launcher. I'm just going to call it Jeff from now on. Jeff is a very useful tool to flush enemies out from inside buildings and from behind cover, and as you can see in lots of the background footage here, it does come in clutch in lots of different situations, especially when you're trying to push onto an objective that's being contested by the enemy team. It can be a little bit janky to use as far as getting the range down. I found there was a little bit of a learning curve until I could really hone in what sort of range I need to shoot at, where exactly I need to aim, etc, etc. But once you get that down, it can be very, very useful, especially if the enemy team are stacking up. Now in close quarters, it comes in very handy if you're holding people in corridors or playing defensively and locking down an entrance. Zane also has a specialist perk, which is Perseverance. He recovers health faster than any of the other specialists after he takes out an enemy, which means you can go from gunfight to gunfight, staying as close to maximum health as possible, even if you were to take damage in the previous fight. This has come in handy very often. As you can see again in the background footage, you'll notice a lot of the time that his health bar shoots straight up after I've won a fight, even though I've taken a lot of damage, so I'm not having to stop to heal, which is very useful considering the med pen is actually a single use until you get resupplied. Zane has quite a bit more survivability than the other Assault specialists, which makes him a decent choice, and there is also the added benefit of his voice lines and his death screams being absolutely hilarious, so you might expect Zane to be quite high up on the list. Maybe not. I guess we'll find out at the end. Next up, we're on to Sundance. Probably one of the more fun specialists to use, as the wingsuit is just really, really cool. To fly around the map, if you're able to use it properly, can be really, really fun. Her gadget is a smart explosive. She can go from using a cluster grenade to a micro drone that seeks out vehicles. The micro drone, I don't think is really powerful enough. It doesn't quite do enough damage, but although I know the smart explosives were nerfed into the ground not that long ago, and unfortunately it does mean that Sundance is very difficult to use in a successful way, I've found. You can see in the background footage that I'm playing Breakthrough here, and we've got lots of corridors that have lots of enemies stacked up in, so getting lots of damage out with the cluster grenade is very useful. As far as finishing those players off and getting kills, not so much. It's a little tricky to land enough damage, but she is very mobile, so if you're able to sneak in behind the enemies, fly yourself in, you're going to have quite a lot of success. As far as not running around in the gigantic open fields that 2042 has to offer, Sundance is a very good way to combat that, because you're going to be traveling way faster than anyone else that's stuck with their boots on the ground. In terms of the pace of gameplay, Sundance is definitely the way to go if you want to get stuck into the action just a little bit quicker every time you respawn. That being said though, the nerfs to the smart explosives do make Sundance's abilities just a little too weak. It seems like you have to choose between using the wingsuit and being extremely agile and being an absolute nuisance to the enemy team, or staying with your boots on the ground, inside buildings, inside corridors, and using those smart explosives to take some of the enemies out and keep them at bay. It's unfortunate because the combination of the two don't seem to go together very often, and it seems very situational. But like I said, Sundance can be very fun as well, so there's a little bit of a toss-up as far as that goes. Toss up. Next up, we're talking about McKay, who has a grappling hook, which is a very useful tool to be able to get the high ground on your enemies, and as we all know in a first-person shooter, that can be a very, very useful tool. The grappling hook got a buff a little while ago, so the range of it has been increased massively, which has completely skyrocketed McKay's potential to being able to get those vantage points on the enemy players. McKay also moves considerably faster when he's using any zip lines, and his perk is called Nimble, which allows you to move far more quickly than any other player while you're aiming down sight. This extra agility in a one-on-one gunfight can come in clutch so often, and is incredibly useful. It's very difficult to hit McKay because of this fact. simply because he's able to move faster when other players are essentially rooted to the floor. Now, I've found it's made a very big difference when I'm playing on Xbox Series X and I play with a controller, but where the movement can be a lot more drastic using mouse and keyboard, that's where this nimble perk really comes into its own. I personally have way more success taking players out and staying in gunfights, staying alive for much longer using McKay, because he is just so much more agile than any of the other specialists. It makes such a huge difference being able to move at a completely different speed, especially when you're aiming down sight. Thanks to the new map reworks and the general verticality of the maps in 2042, especially in those built up areas, using the grappling hook can change the game. McKay is always a solid choice. The only issue I do have with it is that you can only heal yourself once with the class gadget, and getting resupplied is a bit of a problem. But as far as balance goes, I think this is a pretty good trade-off. Lastly, we're going to talk about Dozer, our big boy with a big old shield. Now, along with his ballistic shield, which you can use to one-tap enemies, Dozer's perk, Blast Resistant, allows you to stay alive a little bit longer when you're under explosive fire, as you have extra resilience to explosive damage. Now, personally, I didn't really notice much of a difference with this one. It's kind of hard to tell when the explosives seem to be quite difficult to track in terms of what damage they do to you, but let's just assume that it's worked reasonably well. I don't think it's good enough to really make that much of a difference. Where Dozer can not only become a meme, but can actually be quite useful is with the ballistic shield if you're in close quarters. As you can see in quite a few of these clips, I've managed to isolate some of the enemy players and get those melee kills on them. This is, number one, not only hilarious, but number two, actually a very good way of staying alive and causing some trouble for the other team. A top tip with Dozer is that you can actually slide and melee in the same movement, which means you can close those last few meters very, very quickly. And trying to position yourself in a sort of crossfire with your teammates if you are close enough to use the shield makes a kind of moving kill box, so it can be very useful if you are defending an objective, for instance. Other than running around and having a little bit of fun with the ballistic shield, Dozer is essentially kind of useless, unfortunately. The ballistic shield is incredibly situational and is very, very specific, and I think due to some of the map designs in 2042, there are so many different angles you can be shot at from any one time that having the ballistic shield pointing in one direction just doesn't really do enough to make Dozer stand out while he's using it. Coupling that with the fact that you do actually move a lot slower when you've got the ballistic shield out, it kind of just means you're asking to be shot at from the side or from the rear. Right, so those are all 4 of the Assault class specialists, and I bet you guys are wondering how I've rated them. So here comes that tier list. Here's the big reveal. Dun, 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 dun. As you can see, Dozer is way at the bottom there. He is a D tier list specialist. Unfortunately, his ballistic shield and his perk just seem to not really do enough to warrant him being anywhere else. It seems more like a hindrance than anything. Sundance is the next one up, and she is a B tier. I think she's a solid choice and can be useful in quite a few situations, but more often than not, you might as well just play as though you aren't selecting Sundance and just use your rifle as you normally would and enjoy having a few extra grenades. In the A tier, we have Zane. Now, he can be very, very useful, but the reason he didn't get up to S tier is simply because the Jeff is just a little bit too clunky to use. While I think the while I think Jeff is a really cool gadget to have, and Perseverance is a very good perk for Zane to have as well, I think having to spend time setting the range with Jeff just makes it a little too clunky. That's time that could be spent repositioning and using your assault rifle anyway, so a lot of the time it kind of makes it redundant. Unfortunately, quite a few of the specialists on this list have very specific gadgets, which is why they've been rated as low as they have. And finally, the S tier, it's McKay. He is by far the most out-and-out useful specialist in the assault class. The grappling hook can be useful in so many different situations. He's got so much versatility available to him, and the different gameplay styles you can have using McKay are just almost infinite. The nimble perk really does take it for me, being able to strafe right and left when you're fighting someone in a one-on-one gunfight and moving way further than them to throw their aim off is just such an absolute clutch thing to have in the locker. So it's for that reason that McKay gets an absolute 100% S tier grade. I want to know if you agree with this tier list. Let me know in the comments if you think these guys should be shuffled around, or if that C tier should be filled up with one of them. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like and sub. That's DameOver. Peace.